This is episode 12 of Hoops Forum, a joint effort of Radius Athletics and a Quick Timeout podcast. Big thanks to our sponsors over at 323 Sports. We're about a month away from the start of camp season, and if you're planning to run a camp this summer, chances are you're probably going to be giving away t-shirts. So right now, 323 Sports is offering a moisture management t-shirt, one color print for $6.99 a piece. To learn more about this incredible deal, visit 323sports.com or contact a rep, sales@323sports.com. They'll be sure to do it right for your sports program. My usual co-host, Randy Sherman, is away on vacation this week, so my good friend Andrew Wingreen is with me tonight. And with many of you having spent the last 3 weeks watching the NCAA Tournament, we thought it probably would be a good idea to talk a little bit about X's and O's and some of the trends that we saw in this year's tournament. According to our poll that we did this week, majority of you were interested in us doing some sort of half-court offense, and so that's where we'll probably spend most of our time tonight, although we also have some zone offense that we'll talk about, and then also we'll throw up a couple blobs here at the end to give you a few of those. One thing that I do want to mention before we get started, if you are interested in kind of joining in on the show, we'd love to have any questions or comments sent in. You can just simply reply to this post, and we can fit in those questions and those comments to you. One thing that I do want to make available to you as well, if you're interested in this, if you want to retweet this post, we will send you at the end of this, we'll send you a free playbook. We'll send you a PDF that has a lot of the plays that we'll talk about tonight, as well as a lot more. It will definitely be in your interest if you're into plays to do that. It'll be very valuable. We'll make sure that we give you some value there. So retweet this show for us, and we'll send you that playbook. Either make sure that you're following us or that your DMs are open, and I'll be sure to send that into your direct message box as soon as the show is over. Andrew, let me go ahead and just start with this in general. As you watched the games, was there any favorite team that you had or favorite teams that you had in regards to team offense or X's and O's?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it came down to it, man, those final two teams that we got to see in the national championship were two of the best throughout the whole tournament. I mean, Gonzaga just has so many fun guys to watch, so many weapons, guys who can do different things. And, obviously Mark Few is a great coach. So I loved watching how Gonzaga, just ran their offense and kind of picked apart defenses, up until that final night. And then Baylor, the contrast of styles was fun to watch. And again, they just got playmakers, guys who play hard, but they were able to, really manipulate matchups, I think, in that national championship game and, turn defense into offense, which, was really fun to see. But I think Gonzaga and Baylor were two of my favorites to watch, throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about some of those two teams already. A couple others that we've mentioned on the show. Alabama, enjoyed watching them. I think Loyola, a lot of people were surprised by some of the things that they did, even though somewhat simple, but a trend that we'll address in just a few moments here that a lot of teams are doing now. Creighton is another one with Coach McDermott there, who runs a lot of great stuff, and so we'll include some of those here as we go along. This first one, we want to kind of focus on half-court offense, and so we're just going to work our way through some of these plays and talk through some of them. Again, kind of thinking like trends and some things that we saw that I'm sure a lot of you are already picked up on, but maybe how you can implement these into your teams, whether or not you have the personnel to do that is another story. But let me start with this first one here. Gonzaga is the first one you just mentioned with Gonzaga. And the go screen was like the thing that everyone was doing this year. I went ahead and split this up onto two frames, but I think I originally had it in one frame, but it may have been a little bit confusing. By the way, as you're watching these, I get some questions sometimes as to what I draw these up on. These are all done on Fast Draw. Definitely worth it. I also get questions about that. Like, is it worth it? For me personally, having the library of everything and the availability of exchanging these with other coaches and making my own playbooks. And so that from that perspective, it was definitely worth it. As I'm drawing these, usually I'll try to include like at least two levels on what's happening. And sometimes it can be confusing because you don't necessarily know the timing of plays. But anything that's in black is the first thing that happens in the play. And then the subsequent color is the second thing that happens. Very rarely will I do a third, but if there's a white arrow of some sort, that's usually what the third thing will be, or the final thing will be in the play. So the first one here, ghost screens. Ghost screens, typically we're talking here about the screener coming up and going from slow to sprint to the ball. And then as soon as they get to that spot, sprinting away from the screen that they just set. So it's kind of like a slow up to the ball screen. So in this case, it would be 2 coming up to the ball screen somewhat slowly. And then once they get to where they would typically stop and set the screen, sprinting off there to the side. Was there anything about ghost screens that you either saw that you liked or anything in particular that you saw out of either this play or another one, Andrew, that do you guys run any ghost screens?
Yeah, we do. And I think ghost screens are really, effective, especially in today's basketball game, because, one way to, get past a switching defense is to run ghost screens. They're really hard to switch. The timing can be different depending on how fast somebody sprints up, where they decide to, not set the screen or ghost the screen. So I think that, Gonzaga in particular really utilized that to mess with the switching defenses. And if the defense wants to try and switch, that kind of slide action where they end up passing each other, there's a lot of space and you can oftentimes get downhill. Or, if you got a shooter coming off that, setting a ghost screen, or even a pick and pop 4 type player, a 4s can be really effective too if it's pick and pop, because a lot of times, a team is going to be trying to guard a ball screen a certain way. And when it's a big setting a ball screen for a guard, they might be having in their mind, like, okay, we're going to try and, corral or smoke that screen, a soft hedge, or we're going to try and so when you go into a ghost screen, I think that just opens up a lot of opportunities. It throws the timing of the defense off. And, we saw a lot of teams utilize that throughout the tournament, but love ghost screens, especially against switching defenses.
Yeah, you just said about like opening things up. We've talked a lot on this show about like creating double and triple gaps, and you can see that there on the right frame number 2, that after the ghost screen happens, they send up the 5 to set the ball screen. So you have like those consecutive actions, which are difficult to guard. But then as soon as the ball screen happens, you see there in between 1 and 3, you have really a double gap that the 1 could have turned the corner and get into the basket and scored. A lot of times teams will also clear out a side. So instead of having a ball screen, the 5 will start on the other side of the floor. So maybe they're in like the short corner. So you end up with the 2, the 4, and the 5 on the other side of the floor. And as soon as the 2 has already sprinted past off that ghost screen, the 1 can just drive to the basket. It almost serves like a blur screen. And so you end up with 1 being able to either score. If X5 comes over, you can just give a little dump pass off. Or if X3 for some reason comes off of the corner shooter, then you can kick it out to 3 for a shot there in the corner. So a lot of different things you can do, and a lot of different, like the second layer that you can change to adjust what you're doing there. So ghost screens, there's a reason why everyone was using them. So I'm definitely adding a ghost screen or 2 to my playbook next year. All right, this next one here, I included this one just because kind of an Iverson and then the 4 high, which I know a lot of teams like to run, a lot of things that you can do off of a 4 high. But instead of sending your 2 underneath here, putting them up through an elevator screen for a shot. This one was from Stanford, the Stanford women's team. Andrew, do you like elevator screens?
I do. And, sometimes elevator screens can, I don't want to say they're easy to guard, because they're not. They're hard to execute sometimes because those screens have to close at the right time, or you can get called for offensive foul. So, this set in particular, when you run these Iverson or these loop cuts, oftentimes it's going to be that guy going over top who's going to get the ball on the wing, and they're either going to rip through and drive, or it's going to go into a side ball screen. But you can really disguise an elevator screen with this set. And I think, with those Iverson cuts, sometimes that 4-man's defender will drop off, or he'll kind of be anticipating what's to come, after that pass goes to the wing. So, you have an easier time getting through that elevator. They might not see it coming, especially if you run a few other options out of the Iverson cuts, 1 or 2 times before this. But I think it's a great opportunity, get a shooter a great look from a spot he can hit a shot.
Yeah, Stanford scored a ton of this off of X4 cheating it, and they wanted to take away the reversal back up to the 2. And so it was almost like a screen and slip to the rim. And they got the ball several times right to the 4 on the dive to the front of the rim. So you have no help there because everyone's lifted up, and you typically can get an easy look at the front of the rim. So just forcing the defense to decide which one they want to guard, which one they want to take away. So I like that one. All right, this next one here. So this is bigger picture, 5 out from Loyola. And I know more teams are going to 5 out, where you have the big up there at the top that's kind of initiating things, put the ball in the big's hand, and then let them play. Not everybody has a big like that they will trust to make the decisions, but Loyola had one in particular. You want to talk through this action here, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have it called a Chicago action, or a lot of teams will call this a Zoom action. I know when we run this, we call it Zoom, but when you get a pin down into a dribble handoff, again, if there's a team that's switching defenses or, just trying to really disrupt those actions, those multiple actions consecutively are really hard to guard. And like you said, if you have a 5-man or a 4-man who can create that dribble handoff, and, there's opportunities to hand it off and slip against a switch. There's opportunities to fake that handoff and drive, depending on how they guard it. But those Zoom actions are so tough, and they just, again, there's multiple actions are hard to guard in the first place, but they're really, really hard to guard when they're happening 1 or 2 seconds, right away, because a defense that doesn't communicate well, or maybe they, have one little mistake in how they do stuff, it's going to give you an option to score. So I love that opportunity to get these Chicago actions or Zoom actions to score at a rim.
You can have even like faking the handoff and then splitting it and going straight to the rim. Like there's just so many things. That's where the decision making, you do in the small sided games and running these 3-on-3, 4-on-4, and letting them get a ton of reps and switching up defensive coverages will allow your team to probably recognize those a little bit better. All right, next one here. Let's go ahead and go on and talk about this. I like this because it combines 2 things here. You've got the Spain at the beginning. So after 5 sets the ball screen, then you have 4 setting the back screen for 5. And then in addition to that, frame number 2, you have, the dribble handoff from 1 to 3 that immediately leads into the ball screen. Sometimes that action is kind of called pistol. I know it's not traditional what a pistol is, but anytime. So the last one with our Chicago, where you had the pin down to the handoff, this time the handoff comes first in frame number 1, followed by the ball screen. And without repeating everything that you just said, kind of the same idea of guarding consecutive actions, multiple things happening on the floor. The defense has to decide what they do. This one was from Oral Roberts. I just kind of wanted to throw this in really quickly here. But very similar to the one that we just talked about there. All right, here's the last one here. Ball screens. Are you guys still, do you still have, or do you still see a lot of teams that just kind of go maybe at the end of a half or end of a shot clock? We'll just go 4 low and then send out the 5?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of typical just to clear some space, maybe come out and do a little flat ball screen and just get your guard downhill. But like, you have written up here with Creighton, just getting a guard, whether it's from the corner or somewhere, but kind of having a little hook action where they can go set a screen. And, a lot of times just that little bit of disruption causes the defense to maybe think for a split second. And a lot of times that can just open up. So when the 5 comes to set that ball screen at the top of the key, it just opens up and gives that guard a little bit more space, a little bit more time to get downhill, to make a decision. So just adding a little wrinkle into your set like this, instead of just spacing out everybody on the baseline, have a guard come set a screen for your 5, almost, like I said, a hook action, and get them downhill with a little more space to work.
This was just one of like the more creative ways to get into a ball screen. I mean, this was one of the very simple ones that I diagrammed. There were a few others there were like 3 or 4 things happening before the ball screen happened. And if you were to just take literally the last like 3 seconds of the clip, you would have seen that it's nothing more than just a ball screen. But I think as teams have gotten, you can't just send a 5 out and then like, all right, let's make something happen here. So kind of creating confusion. I think that's the influence of the European actions, where you're creating confusion and maybe at the beginning some false actions to then get into the thing that you want to get into. And then frame number 2, it doesn't end with a screen, roll, shake. It was actually a screen, and then 5 went and pinned down. So the 1 wasn't even trying to attack off of that. It was a pin down, and then you have the opportunity there for the 5 to slip to the front of the rim, which I thought made it kind of a little bit more interesting there. So anything else with that one?
No, I mean, I think, again, just adding those little wrinkles, because most teams are going to put all their effort and all their focus on that initial ball screen at the top of the key, and just the positioning of however they guard that. When the 5 goes to set that pin down instead of rolling, I mean, that's going to open up a lot of stuff for the 2 to get a shot, or like you said, for the 5 to slip and dodge to the rim, and just being a little patient, making one more action happen, make the defense guard one more. again, it opens up a whole new world of opportunity.
All right, let's go on and talk a little bit here about zone offense. Those are our half-court offense, man stuff. Let's go ahead and talk about some zone stuff. This one was from Loyola. If you just look at this, I had somebody comment and be like, that doesn't look like anything special. It looks like what you would typically do against the zone. And I totally agree. But there's the timing of things. And I think the cuts of how you send people through instead of just sending them in straight line drives or having them go run to a spot and then stay. The 4 at the beginning kind of going and almost setting like a ghost type screen. He wasn't even going and stopping and setting a screen. It was just to make it look like it was a screen and then running to the backside of the zone. And then in frame number 2 there, flashing to the middle. And then what you're left with is on the left side of the floor. You have X3 that's now having to decide, do I want to guard 1 or do I want to guard 4? So when 5 catches the ball in the middle, you have the option immediately of catching, facing, looking opposite, and either finding 4 or 1 on that side of the floor. We talked about this with Randy a few weeks ago, but we have a whole episode on zone offense. If you search hashtag zone offense tips, you should see it there towards the top. We talked a lot about these and showed some videos of how we were trying to distort the zone, and we're going to show in just a few moments some sets for screening the zone, whether that's ball screening or screening the inside of the zone. Andrew, do you all run patterns? Is there some sort of continuity? Are you more quick hitters? What is your zone offense like down there at Stetson?
Yeah, we have a few quick hitters we do, but for the most part, it's a lot of gaps, just running a continuity, trying to find the gaps, typical zone offense. But obviously teams will pick up on that. So we do have some wrinkles and some different things we can throw in with sets. But the thing I love, watching Loyola's zone offense, and everyone was talking about Porter Moser and how disciplined his team was, how fundamental his team was. And like you said, there's nothing really special about this set. There's nothing special about where these guys are going, but it's how they do it. And the timing, they would set a cut up, they would change their speed, and they would explode. And then in a zone, obviously you have to honor your area and you have to honor those guys in that spot. And just the way that they move that defense around to create these small gaps for a 5-man to flash. And then now you're playing a 2-on-1 in these gaps. And that's where I think the genius comes with watching a guy like Porter Moser in his own offense is not necessarily the play itself, but watching how his guys time it up and how they actually do hard cuts. And they, when they flash, it's big hands, and now it's make a play. So I think that's what's really cool about his stuff.
Yeah. All right, this next one here, the principle I just mentioned about screening the zone, screening the top of the zone, and then creating an outnumbered situation on the right side of the floor, and then screening the inside of the zone as well. This is a Kansas one. I know you know a little bit about Kansas and have studied some of their stuff, but they have a ton of great zone offense stuff, and this is just one of them here. Anything from this you like in particular, or anything you've seen from Kansas that you like about their zone offense?
Yeah, I mean, Bill Self is so good, especially in overloading the zones, just like here. I mean, you run those ball screens, and again, you have to honor a ball screen. You have to defend a ball screen, whether you're in man or zone. So, in this set, you're putting the 3-man on an island, and he's having to decide, okay, am I going to guard the ball, or am I going to guard the point guard who's filling out to the side? And he has to make a decision. Obviously, you got to stop the ball. So now it opens up that pass to the 1, opens up a gap. And now the timing, like we talked about with the Loyola, that is that 4-man screens the inside and the 5 dives to that block. It just opens up a world of opportunity because it's almost impossible to guard. Like you can't not honor the ball handler coming off that ball screen. So it's an easy pass. And if you set that screen and time it up right, it's going to be a wide open layup every single time.
Similar principle, but screening the different levels of the zone. So we have the top level, the 2 screening, and then on the bottom level, you have both the 4 and the 5 screening the underside of the zone. This is from Winthrop, pinup play. They ran this more during the season than they did during the NCAA tournament. But you have the 1 dribbling all the way to the corner, and then that principle again of attacking the zone from behind, sneaking in from behind and getting a pass underneath. I was shocked at how many times this worked, and it worked sometimes against the same team. So just another one very similar to what we just said with screening different levels of the zone. I threw this one in just at the very end. If you search Chalk Talk on Twitter and Fast Models post, I do each week a play of the week. We call it Chalk Talk. And this was our Chalk Talk from last week with Gonzaga. screening the top of the zone and also screening the second level of the zone. This was really just a shameless plug for Chalk Talk. So if you haven't already seen that, you can go back and watch that video here. Let's finish up here, Andrew, with some blobs. I know a lot of blobs. You do a lot of blobs. When we were together, you were in charge of the blobs. So there's 2 here that I have at the end, but we can talk about some other things as well. The first one, just the principle that I saw a lot of times, like screen the screener. And you're familiar with screen the screener. In addition to this one, we can talk about this one as well. But in addition to this one, any other screen the screener type things that you have seen that you like or that you guys have used?
Yeah, I mean, I think screen the screener is so powerful and based on out of bounds because it's hard to guard that, and you can oftentimes run it out of several different sets, different looks. So I mean, Baylor ran it out of a box set, but you can very well run the exact same play out of a 4-low set. You could even figure out a way to do it out of a 4-high set just by the way you move your guys, where you put them. But the screener, again, if you want to switch it, you get a mismatch. If you want to try and hedge it, most likely someone's going to be open. That slip guy is probably going to be open. So I think just messing around with, kind of disguising where you're setting those screeners and obviously if you can get a shot and maybe hit that 3 in the corner with the 2, the very next time you run that set, they're going to hedge out on that. And now the 5's got to slip to the basket. And you kind of, it's a game of chess where you can manipulate the defense and kind of get them to guard it a certain way, which, that's one thing I loved about, teaching our blobs and just talking through those is how can we run something, set it up, do the next thing. Then we're setting up the next play. And I think the great coaches do that. And Baylor, they scored really well on their baseline out of bounds.
I've ran this type of play like multiple times in a row. Because like you said, the first time a team's going to guard it one way, and then I tell them the next time to look for this next one. And then obviously the third time as well. This play was so great that Baylor used it on Monday night, and Stanford had used it the night before and scored several times off it as well. I would strongly encourage you to take a look at Stanford's blob plays. They run things out of a box. This is the women's team, and they have a lot of great stuff that I really haven't seen from other teams. So if you're looking for some more box sets for your blobs, Stanford women's basketball would be a good choice for you. All right, this is the last one here from our other national title team. This is from Gonzaga, and I included this one in trends because of the stagger screens. I saw a lot of stagger screens both from the men's and the women's side against out-of-bounds plays. It's not something you typically see. A lot of times you see stagger plays going towards the basket in a half-court scenario, but I don't really a lot of times see them coming out from underneath in a blob scenario. And this is one, they will run this. Frame number 1, they'll run it standalone, but then they'll also do a second level to it. And I think that's probably the thought that I want to portray to you or communicate to you to think about. I see a lot of teams that will have your inbounds plays, and they have one basically go-to, and if that go-to is not there, then the play's over and they have a half-court set. But think more of them like, okay, first option, is that there? If not, then the second one. So frame number 1, you have your staggers, dribble handoff for a shooter. I've also seen them pass it out off of this. It doesn't necessarily have to be a dribble handoff. But then in addition to that, you could have in frame number 2, another stagger, 5 clears out of side. And so you have the 2 that you could either pass to the 1 coming off of the 3-4 stagger, or you have all that space so the 2 can drive it to the hoop and score. So the idea of having multiple options, and then in addition to that, having multiple options within the one frame would be my thoughts with that one. You see anything else with this you like?
Yeah, I think one time, I can't remember what year it was, but we ran a play similar to this, and we had the 5 and the 4 kind of swapped. So you have maybe a pick and pop 4 stretch guy who's, getting that inbounds pass, and he comes in for the dribble handoff. And instead of, in this diagram, we have the 5 kind of diving down to the opposite block, just have that 4 pick and pop. And 1, if the 2 comes off that dribble handoff and, they switch it or he turns the corner, like he has an opportunity to turn the corner, but if he pitches it back to the 4, you got a shot. Or you can look to, hit that 1 coming off the double stagger now and kind of reverse it. And a lot of times teams kind of have to honor that. But with the double stagger, they may have honored it on the first action and they don't have anyone to honor it on the second action. Mm-hmm. So now you got a wide open shot. If they stick with it, that 4-man, or it would be the 5 in this situation, but the 4-man on this diagram would have a wide open slip. That big to big, you can kind of play high-low. And then, again, you can disguise these. You can run them out of box sets, 4 lows, whatever you want. But the double stagger, again, multiple actions, just going back to that concept, that idea of anytime you can get the defense to guard a dribble handoff, then a stagger, then another stagger, there's going to be an opportunity. And as long as you guys understand the decision making and what's going to be there, I think you should be able to score or at least get a great look on these type of plays.
As you talked frame number 2 there also made me think you could have basically a triple stagger with 5 just standing there if 2 dribbles down to the corner, or if 2 dribbles to the basket to score and gets cut off, then you can have kind of like a crackback action where the 2 turns around, reverse pivots, and throws it back to 1 for a shot. So you can kind of mix things up, do a lot of things out of that aren't even diagrammed here. All right, now is our time. It's our time to talk Beyond the Scoreboard, a segment presented by Sideline Interactive. You may be wanting to increase your revenue for your program or improve your fan experience. And Sideline Interactive is the leading manufacturer in scoring tables, video display boards for high schools and colleges around the country. To find out more about Sideline Interactive, visit sidelineinteractive.com. Our Beyond the Scoreboard segment here that we want to talk about tonight, Andrew, just beyond this final score of that Baylor Gonzaga game, and everybody, I think we've had time to digest it and think about it. And I've heard a lot of radio talk shows talk about it. But Baylor's ability to get out to a big lead, I know Gonzaga came back. I don't ever really feel like it was a blowout, even though the score was like that. I think we were always kind of like waiting for Gonzaga to come back, and it never really happened. But what impressed you most about Baylor's performance in that title game?
Yeah, it was one of those games where you kind of assumed and figured that Gonzaga was going to be able to get right back into it. They were going to get it close at halftime and then just chip away. And it just never really happened. And I think, you tweeted something about this during the game, but Baylor's energy and just the way they played defense was the changing moment of the game. I mean, it was every possession. They were hustling. They were active with their hands, active with their feet. They were getting deflections. They were diving on the floor. And it was every possession. It wasn't like they strung 1, 2, or 3 together. It was every time down the floor, Gonzaga just could not get an easy look unless they somehow forced a turnover and got in transition. But I think the play that, stuck out to me, and I'm sure most of you guys have seen, the clip of Masio Teague just kind of going for a steal, got a deflection, saved the ball, going out of bounds, and he goes 2-3 rows deep behind the bench. Gonzaga is reversing the ball. They get it to the opposite corner of the floor, and Masio Teague, who's behind the bench on the opposite side, sprints over, and he contests the shot. And for you guys who have seen me on here before or listened to podcasts, I love contesting shots, and I think it's a huge value to your team. And that play just kind of encapsulated the entire mindset of Baylor for that game. And it was all night they were doing that kind of stuff and just wore Gonzaga down. And again, we as coaches tell our players that stuff all the time. Those are the winning type of plays. If you guys do that every possession, you're going to win games. And I think Baylor demonstrated that, and they exemplified exactly what every coach in America would just love to see from their team every night. But it was an incredible performance by them. Really excited for Scott Drew and Jerome Tang just getting that W, and they've obviously put in a lot of work with those guys, and they do it for the right reasons with their culture of joy. So it was really fun to watch Baylor.
It's very difficult to get your players to play like that for 40 minutes straight, and I felt like they played for that pretty close to that. And even from that very first possession, you could something was up when it felt like they got 6 offensive rebounds to start the game, like one right after the other. And that's one of those effort plays. And what you mentioned, another effort play. And your team, that's one that I'm definitely going to be showing to our team. You can make up for you don't have to be perfect, but you can make up for not being perfect with effort plays, whether that is diving on the floor, sprinting across the floor to contest a shot. Like, their team understood what it took to win, and it didn't have to be shooting an incredible, although they did shoot pretty well from the field too. So a lot of things that came together well for them. So that was really cool to see. Appreciate all of those who have joined us this week. And if you missed any part of the show, you can go back and watch the replay anytime on YouTube, also on Twitter. To listen to the show, you can go to any podcast platform, search A Quick Timeout, and there you'll find the audio version of the show. For those who retweeted the post this week, I'm going to send you that playbook here in the next 24 hours, so be on the lookout for that. Thanks so much to Andrew for filling in this week. For Andrew Wingreen, I'm Tony Miller. We'll talk to you again next Friday on Hoops Forum.